Thank you, and I thank the Minister for sharing about the upcoming RLAF Ramadan fundraising appeal. I believe the previous tranche, over 5 million, was raised, which really speaks to the generosity of Singaporeans. Just two clarifications, Minister. Firstly, given that the media has reported how the receipt of aid has been affected on the ground in Gaza, is Minister able to share at all how the earlier tranche of aid was used by RLAF to reach the innocent victims of the Israel-Palestine crisis and the rebuilding in Gaza, as well as the intended use of the future ones, so that Singaporeans are aware of the impact of their efforts? And secondly, given how protracted the hostilities have been, while the heart of this is not a religious issue, how can community leaders help Singaporeans of all backgrounds process, the deep sense of injustice and helplessness felt, so as to prevent unfortunate divisive postings on social media, as well as impact on the ground, which affect communities such as Singaporean Muslims and Singaporean Jews?
Thank you, Ms. Nadia, for that clarification question. Firstly, every fund that RLAF would have collected would need to be channeled into bodies and use that our government approves. So in the previous tranche, we worked with UNRWA, and in the coming tranche, we will work with MFA to identify how these funds will be channeled. And I do not believe this is the last time we will be doing it. Well, I said just now that we will have to move on to do things for the community, important things that we need to do for the community. I foresee that we will probably need to raise funds again, because it does not look like this conflict will be resolved fairly quickly. The second question, sorry. All of us need to recognize two things about Singapore. It is a small country. We may be a strong government, a strong country, but we are a small country. And therefore, when we go out and say things, our foreign policy is based on our long-term interests as a small country. So it's to safeguard our independence, our sovereignty, our territorial integrity, our security, and all for the sake of our citizens. And these things are most important, or in fact, more important for a small country than a big country. So when we say things, I hope people understand the context upon which we say it. For example, our position on Israel has been consistent. We have said that from the start, Israel has a legitimate right to defend itself from acts of terror. But that's not just Israel, that's Singapore too. In fact, every country has a right of defense against acts of terror. In the case of Israel, it was that incident on 7 October. For us, we have to guard ourselves against any incident and sending the signal that we will act as a right of self-defense. But there is probably our similarity to Israel ends, because we know that the right to self-defense also must comply with international humanitarian law, including principles of necessity and proportionality, the principles of distinction and humanity enshrined in the Geneva Conventions. And that is why we voted for 2 UNGA resolutions which call for humanitarian ceasefire to alleviate the suffering of the civilian victims in Gaza. And I hope as leaders, we try to educate people who talk about this to understand the context, what the government say, and why the government said it. I think it's important that we live as Singaporeans to know why these things have to be said the way they are. And finally, though, most recently we have seen Minister Vivian stated in Parliament last week that the Israeli military response has gone too far. And that is, again, a consistent departure from just calling the right for self-defense with the need to balance the right of human dignity and human rights too. Secondly, Singapore is not just a small country. Singapore is a diverse country. We are diverse, and if our solution to a small country is to be strong, our solution in being diverse is to be united. And that is why, even as a minister, I may have my sentiments about Palestinians, fellow Muslims, but I must also, as a Muslim leader and a minister in cabinet, in a multiracial, multi-religious society, country like ours, to speak with one voice in cabinet, in as much as Singaporeans should be united and speak with one voice. Because we need to protect Singapore's national interests, both domestically and internationally. A united people, a united government, that's how we become a strong government, a strong country, despite being small. But I recognize that Singapore Muslims do have connections with the Palestinians. But we also should recognize that we are in a unique position, and often not the same situation as many other Muslim communities, especially when they are majority. And therefore, for us being diverse, we have to work together to preserve the peace between ourselves, never be driven, never be divided. And as I shared in the COS, our community thus far has proven themselves where citizenry is concerned. And I hope that as the situation unravels over the next few months, we continue to hold this, that we must never be divided. We must always seek to unite because we are diverse. And that's the only way Singapore can survive.